In the United States, we are less than 2 months away from a presidential election. And what many of us nerds need to know is how exactly do the two leading candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, differ on computer specific policies, right? I'm not talking about immigration and taxes and blah blah blah. No, we're going to ignore all of that for a moment. And I want to spend a few minutes going through just factually, not my opinion, but just how the individual candidates differ, both their current policies and their past actions and statements on computer technology related topics, because this is important, right? How do they differ on artificial intelligence, internet censorship, net neutrality, broadband internet access, TikTok, all sorts of stuff, right? So I reached out to both campaigns, President Trump and Kamala Harris, and Vice President Kamala Harris. President Trump's campaign got back to me. They didn't provide me a tremendous amount of detail. However, they did point me to a couple of state pass statements on a few things and their website, which lists their policies. So that was nice. It was a nice response. It happened within about 2 or 3 hours of me sending that email out. I followed up with a number of questions relating to open source and free software and open data and medical data, all sorts of things relating to data, software, online privacy and whatnot. I didn't get any additional follow-up from the Trump campaign on that. When I reached out to the Vice President Harris's campaign, I never specifically heard back from them. This was some time back now. However, within a few hours of emailing their campaign with a list of questions relating again to AI and Section 230 and open source software and everything else, I began receiving fundraising emails about one every 2 to 3 hours from the email address I used. I had not been receiving them prior to that. So the Harris campaign responded by signing me up to their mailing list. That all of that said, I am not going to tell any of you how to vote. I'm not going to tell you any of that at all. I just simply want to walk through as factually as we can these topics here. This is what we can glean from publicly made statements. Since neither of the campaigns are addressing open source, we're not going to be getting into open source. Neither of the campaigns have ever mentioned Linux or such things, so we're not going to be getting into that at all. Luckily, there's a number of tech topics they have talked about. Let's start with TikTok, because why not? You got to start somewhere. So how do the two differ on TikTok? Well, this is actually kind of difficult to answer. So back in 2020, before President Trump left office, he signed an executive order, quote, addressing the threat posed by TikTok, right? And it was not exactly a pro TikTok executive order. It was very hard on TikTok. It was very clearly hard on TikTok, pushing for TikTok to sell. And then along those same lines, same year, 2020, back when Trump was in the White House, he signed the order regarding the acquisition of Musical.ly, Musically, by ByteDance Limited. Section 1, findings. There's credible evidence that leads me to believe that ByteDance Limited, an exempted company with limited liability incorporated under the laws of the Cayman Islands, called ByteDance, through acquiring all districts' interest in Musically, an exempted company with limited liability incorporated under the laws of the Cayman Islands, Musically, might take action that threatens to impair the national security of the United States. As a result of the acquisition, ByteDance merged its TikTok application with Musically social media application, created a single integrated social media application, and they invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or they talked about that anyway, and they were generally not pro TikTok, right? That was kind of the stance. The Chinese government controls TikTok, they own TikTok. They were generally not pro TikTok. However, That seems to have changed. Trump's stance on TikTok has become positive. In fact, he posted over on Truth Social, truthsocial.com, a video talking about, quote, "For all of those that want to save TikTok in America, vote Trump." Fascinating. So his stance has actually changed quite a bit. And the same is true of Harris and Biden. So check this out. In shortly after President Biden took office, President Biden signed an executive order revoking Trump's executive order that was against TikTok, right? He just tossed it out. He said, "Oh, Trump, you're against TikTok. Well, I'm for TikTok." So he signed an executive order revoking Trump's executive order. So he was against TikTok. Then this is real and this is happening. So the Senate, this happened just this last April, passed a bill. The House passed it as well, forcing TikTok's parent company to sell or face a ban in the United States. And then Biden signed it. So Trump went from TikTok evil to "I'm going to save TikTok." Biden and Harris went from "I'm going to save TikTok" to TikTok evil. I have no idea exactly all that means, but they've changed on their policies. Now, if you look at just what actions they have taken, Trump would be more anti-TikTok and Biden and Harris would be more pro-TikTok. But if you look at their more recent statements and more recent actions, it's the reverse seems to be true. Honestly, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where the two candidates stand vis-a-vis TikTok and in relation to Chinese ownership of and control over social media and communications platforms like WeChat and many others. Honestly, your guess is as good as mine because both sides, both Trump and Harris, have changed their stances relating to China, ownership of software companies, and TikTok over the last 4 years. It's kind of hard to tell. So moving on to the next thing here. Let's talk about net neutrality a little bit. This one's much easier to answer. Trump has consistently been generally opposed to net neutrality legislation. Let me see if I've got this here. He back during Obama's presidency, Obama's attack, he posted this over on Twitter. "Obama's attack on the internet is another top-down power grab. Net neutrality is the fairness doctrine, will target conservative media." And his policies continued from there. He appointed Ajit in order to be the FCC chairman, and the FCC chairman ran a vote in the FCC that made sure we had no net neutrality legislation. Kamala Harris, back when she was running for president the first time, made the following statement, again over on Twitter: "Congress needs to reverse the FCC's misguided decision to repeal net neutrality protections. Let's not waste another second longer to pass the Save the Net Act, restore net neutrality, and keep the internet open and accessible for all Americans." Okay, fair enough. It's very clear which side they come down on. Trump is not pro net neutrality. Kamala Harris is pro net neutrality. So if you like net neutrality, kind of know which way you vote for. That's that. Interestingly, back in 2019, Mozilla Corporation actually sued the FCC in order to try and block them from repealing net neutrality, which had already been done. But anyway, the courts eventually ruled in favor of the FCC for the most part. But it did, the way the ruling was worded, it did lead the way towards some states were able to implement net neutrality legislation from that point forward. Mozilla, the EFF, and many other organizations were very, very vocal in their advocating for net neutrality laws and legislation. By and large, most Republicans are against net neutrality laws and legislation. Moving forward a little bit here. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I've got this here. Let me scroll up here. Yes. So the net neutrality, this is more net neutrality stuff. All right. So yeah, net neutrality is currently implemented. We have net neutrality legislation in place, but that's fairly recent. That didn't get in place until earlier this year. Okay, let's move on to online censorship. I think online censorship is a bit on the fascinating side. This also will dovetail into the Section 230 discussion because it's all kind of one and the same. So before President Trump left office, he again signed an executive order on preventing online censorship by the authority vested in me as the president as president by the United States by the Constitution and laws of the United States. Blah blah blah. Here ordered as follows. Policy. Free speech is the bedrock of American democracy. Our founding fathers protected this sacred right with the First Amendment to the Constitution. The freedoms to express and debate ideas is the foundation for all of our rights as a free people. In a country that has long cherished freedom, we cannot allow a limited number of online platforms to handpick the speech that Americans may access and convey on the internet. This practice is fundamentally un-American and anti-democratic. When large, powerful social media companies censor opinions with which they disagree, they exercise a dangerous power. They cease functioning as passive bulletin boards and ought to be viewed and treated as content creators. It's very, very straightforward. Basically, the argument from the Trump side of things is fairly simple. Social media and various online publishing platforms, everything from YouTube to X, right? The whole gamut. Once they begin actively pushing certain narratives and acting in an editorial capacity, they no longer are operating under Section 230 protection. That's the general idea of the policy here, right? They should not be allowed to do that and still receive Section 230 protection. That's kind of where Trump has pushed so far. However, as a contrast to that, Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, has pushed sort of the opposite approach, quote, saying, quote, "We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy." What's interesting is both sides couch it as they are fighting to save democracy. So let's move the democracy thing off to the side for a minute and just focus on what exactly the policy appears to be that both are pushing. Let me see here. Do I have this? Yes, here we go. So now the Trump campaign, donaldjtrump.com/issues, has posted an official policy for this election relating to censorship and free speech. I'm going to read it to you now since it's fairly short and I want you to know the policies. President Trump is absolutely committed to dismantling and destroying the left-wing censorship regime. If we don't have free speech in America, then we will no longer be a free country. President Trump's plan includes firing any federal bureaucrat who is engaged in censoring the lawful speech of American citizens, banning taxpayer funds from being used to categorize lawful speech for purposes of illicit censorship, banning federal agencies from censoring speech, stopping federal funding for all nonprofits and academic programs engaged in censorship, passing a digital Bill of Rights and enacting landmark legislation to drastically limit the ability of big social media platforms to restrict free speech. By restoring free speech, we will begin to reclaim our democracy. So I read that for you there so you understand what the specifics are of how Trump plans to, as he says, end censorship and reclaim free speech. That's their official stated policy. Harris doesn't seem to have an official policy, but once again, she has stated, quote, where is this at? There it is at the Hill. "We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy." Okay, so they have a responsibility to fight against hate. She doesn't specifically call out what constitutes that, but she says things that are hate must be that social media platforms have to be accountable for things that are hateful. That seems strange to me. I'll let people judge for themselves. But Vice President Harris doesn't seem to have a specific set of policies and actions that she will take. The Trump campaign obviously listed out a series of actions that they would take to achieve their goal. Vice President Harris has not. So it's a little bit more ambiguous, or we're kind of left parsing some of her words at various statements, which she hasn't really made a lot of. The one thing she has repeated a few times now is that she doesn't like hate. And that it seems like she's suggesting that social media and online platforms must censor hate. But she doesn't say what hate is, how they would censor hate, or what the government's role in regulating that or being part of that would be. But clearly she seems more pro censorship in this regard, and the Trump campaign seems more anti-censorship in this regard. All right, let's move on to internet access. This is kind of an interesting one. The Trump campaign, I'm going to just tell you this flat out first, doesn't have a specific policy around internet access for this particular election. However, past policies have slowly evolved. He started out wanting to use public funds to enhance and install new broadband and inexpensive broadband internet access for people in various parts of the nation, such as people who couldn't afford internet access and that sort of thing. Over the years, his policy shifted. Towards the end of his presidency, he seemed to be more pro letting the private sector and kind of providing incentives, such as tax incentives for the private sector, to implement inexpensive broadband internet access. That seemed to be where his policy ideals have shifted, and people who talk on behalf of the Trump campaign have suggested that same thing repeatedly. Now, the Biden and Harris administration that is currently in office have had a very distinct set of policies related to broadband internet access across the United States. Specifically, I'm going to read this to you now. It's from Brendan Carr, who was who was previously a counsel for the FCC, and he posted this over on X, and I just thought it was a nice summary of both the policy of Biden and Harris and where it's at currently. In 2021, Vice President Harris agreed to lead the administration's $42 billion plan to expand internet to millions of Americans. As of his posting of this, it was a little over 1,000 days later, and so far not one person has been connected to the internet, not one single person. And he goes on to have many opinions based on that, but I think that's worth noting as the stated goals of Biden-Harris has been to utilize government funds to install broadband internet access for people who either don't have it or can't currently afford it. And so far, that $42 billion project has resulted in nothing. Not just like it hasn't gone well, but there's nobody that has internet access under that plan yet. and it doesn't look like that's actually going to happen. So what that means is every man, woman, and child in the United States has paid $100 and something so far for nobody to get internet access. This one seems fairly cut and dried to me as which side you come down on. If you like the leave it up to the private sector and more or less hope for the best, maybe nudge it in a little bit, then you like Trump's plan. If you like the spend lots of money but don't do anything, you like the Biden-Harris plan. So I'll let you decide on that one. Let's move forward a little bit. Let's talk about the AI side of things, because neither has really strong policies related to artificial intelligence. Let me scroll down here. I know I've got a quote in here. I'm gonna search for it. AI. No, that's not AI. Said AI. Wait. There it is. Scroll up. There he is. All right. So according to the Trump policies, Quote, with historic innovation in artificial intelligence, America's software industry needs affordable electricity now more than ever. Inexpensive electricity could make the difference in the world-changing race between US and China to develop the most sophisticated AI. That seems to sum up the majority of Trump's position regarding AI, is that there's a lot of money there. The United States should dominate it, and it needs electricity. He's not wrong. I mean, we've seen the massive investment from Microsoft and Amazon and Oracle and everyone else in nuclear power and everything else in order to power all of those AI data centers. And Trump seems to make it part of his platform that's important. Now, exactly what he'll do related to making that happen is a bit nebulous. If you judge it based on the remainder of his platform, you would assume that relaxing regulations would be a significant part of of how they're going to go about making sure there's enough electricity. They've also talked a bit about increasing the usage of fossil fuels and the like, and basically using multiple electrical generation sources. The Biden and Harris administration, on the other hand, hasn't really talked about the electrical demands of artificial intelligence. What they have done is last October of 2023, back when AI hype was really ramping up steam, right? That AI hype train was really rocking and rolling. Biden and Harris released an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. And I'll read a little bit to you now. Artificial intelligence holds extraordinary potential for both promise and peril. Responsible AI use has the potential to help solve urgent challenges while making our world more prosperous, productive, innovative, and secure. At the same time, irresponsible use could exacerbate societal harms such as fraud, discrimination, bias, and disinformation, displace and disempower workers, stifle competition, and pose risk to national security. Harnessing AI for good and realizing its myriad benefits requires mitigating its substantial risks. This endeavor demands a society-wide effort that includes government, private sector, academia, and civil society. The Biden-Harris administration places the highest urgency on governing the development and use of AI safely and responsibly, and is therefore advancing coordinated federal government-wide approach to doing so. In the end, AI reflects principles of the people who build it, the people who use it, and the data upon which is built. Policy and principles is the policy of my administration to advance and govern the development and use of AI in accordance with 8 guiding principles and priorities. When undertaking the actions set forth in this order, executive departments and agencies shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, adhere to these principles, while as feasible, taking into account the views and other agencies, industries, members, blah, 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 are basically, it's kind of a waffly executive order. It says a lot of things about doing a good job when it's possible and when it's not. It says AI is good, but AI should be done well. That's not really a policy, but it is a stance. So what we have here is the difference between Trump and Harris is they both seem pro AI in general, right? AI good, but you got to do them well. Trump is specifically calling out the energy sector challenges relating to AI. Harris hasn't issued any policies or suggestions of what her policies might be relating to energy sectors or the development of AI. So it's a little bit hard to know what she's actually thinking in that regard. But if you judge the actions of the Biden administration as the same as what she says, which is all we really have to go on with Vice President Harris, and probably makes the most sense, you would come away with it's important, but there are challenges, but the government should have a role in it, but what that government role is not clear. but the government should have a role in it. So it doesn't look like President Trump is suggesting that the government should have an active role in the development of AI, whereas Harris is suggesting, and Biden-Harris is suggesting that it should. That seems to be the primary two differences, is the electrical side of things and the involvement of the government, and how much power the government will have over AI regulations. So there you have it. This is really what we know at this point. We don't have answers on, again, open source and free software. We don't have answers on more privacy focused issues. We do have some good answers on Section 230 and online censorship, which is great because those are really distinct differences between the two. Same with net neutrality. We have very clear differences between the two of them, which I like it when there's a clear distinction. TikTok and Chinese government controlled online media is confusing at best from both candidates. Neither candidate has really made a consistent, clear set of statements or actions about that. In both cases, they've changed what they've said or compared to what they've said or done in the past, and it's not consistent, it's not clear, so it's hard to tell. With as far as artificial intelligence goes, it's not a huge difference, but clearly Trump's approach is to tackle the electrical side of things, to enable it, and the Harris approach is that government should have control at some level over it. Those are distinct differences, and those are worth weighing. So that's what we know. So if you're a nerd and those topics are important to you, this is the difference. Sometimes it's worthwhile putting aside what team am I on and just looking at it from the point of view of specific topics and policies. It's nice to be able to do that from time to time. I wish that both campaigns had been more communicative. To the Trump campaign's credit, they did get back to me, and they did have some stated policies already written out for me to read through. They didn't respond to all of my questions. I really would have liked them to, but they didn't. The Harris campaign, thanks for signing me up for all your mailing lists. Boy, am I on a lot of them now. I get emails every couple hours from 24 hours a day, every couple hours from Harris campaign, and now from a couple of the PACs that I never signed up for either. So the Harris campaign, when you contact them as press, they then share your email address to multiple political action committees that then will start contacting you as well. So thanks for that. That was nice. I have not, however, at that email address that I used, which I only use to contact people for press contacts and whatnot, I have not received any of those sorts of emails from the Trump campaign or any of their PACs. So, yeah, I just felt that was worth pointing out. I want to say thank you to all of the Lunduke Journal subscribers. You are one of the most open-minded, thoughtful and intelligent groups of nerds on the entire inner tubes, and I just want to high five every single one of you. Thank you for subscribing to the Lunduke Journal and making it possible to do what I do without any support, without any advertising money, anything from big tech, little tech, medium tech, any of the tech. I truly appreciate it. So lunduke.com, lunduke.locals.com if you do not currently subscribe and you would like to, which you do. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.